Yeah, so after the time of her death, something happened inside of me. I kind of didn't. I got really depressed. I had all these emotions inside of me I didn't know how to deal with. I kind of moved away. What happened is that I kind of moved away from a support system. I fell into doing drugs and fell in the bad crowd. And to tell you the truth, at the time, I was like in a self-destruct mode. When I would cross the street, I wouldn't look before I crossed. I wasn't trying to commit suicide, but in my heart, I was like, you know what? If the car hits me when I cross the street, well, I don't really care anymore. From the time that she died to the time I got arrested, it was 3 months. So 3 months of self-destruct mode, and I ended up in prison with a 12-year term for armed robbery. It was second degree armed robbery, and at the time they gave me a special enhancement for having a firearm during the crime. Even though I didn't use it, they gave me 10 years for having the firearm. So they gave me 2 years for the robbery and 10 years for having a firearm at the time, and that was for our first offense ever. What ended up happening, I ended up being in prison. They gave me 12 years. I had a lot of time to reflect and to change my way of thinking. When I was incarcerated, they ended up moving me to Arizona because California prison systems were so overpopulated at the time. So they sent me to an out-of-state facility in Arizona, and that's where finally had the opportunity to get my GED. At the time, I had already done like most of my sentence. I had about 3 years left. So what happened is they sent me to back to California to a fire camp, and I served the remaining of my 3 years in incarceration in a Cal Fire fire camp as a wildland firefighter. It was a big change. I went from being inside a prison yard to being outside in public and living in the forest, which was, a drastic change for me. I went from being in a cell to having like almost my own room. I wasn't sure what was going to happen to me once I was going to be released. I knew there was a big possibility that they were going to deport me. At the time, ICE had already came to see me, and they told me that they were going to take my residency away because I committed a crime while I was a permanent resident. My parole date came and went. They did not release me because I had a ICE hold. ICE came and get me, and they formally rearrested me. They took me into an ICE detention center. I was there for about, I want to say, 2 months, and then I was deported from the Oakland airport. I was in Sacramento County in the ICE detention center. They drove me to Oakland airport. Oakland airport at the time had a contract with ICE where they were deporting immigrants, and they kind of didn't want nobody to know, right? This was going on, so they would drive us to the back of the airport in the middle of the night, um, without the public seeing us, and they would board us on a plane and fly us to San Diego, where they would drive us across the border and deport us. Since they said that I committed a crime when I was a permanent resident, that kind of nullified my residency, and they took my residency away from me. The thing is, and the thing I want people to understand, right? Some people they look at me and they were like, oh, you know what? He's just the immigrant that came over here and committed a crime. I don't see it that way. I came to Oakland, California when I was 7 months old. I grew up in Oakland all my life till I didn't get into trouble till I was 24 for the first time ever. To me, I was an American. I was not an immigrant that came and did a crime. I did a crime as an American. In the last 3 years that I worked for Cal Fire, I risked my life every day that I was on a fire. I think that there should be some kind of legal pathway for people like us. This was the first time that I have ever gotten in trouble. I never got in trouble, not even when I was a kid. The first time that I get in trouble, this is what I had to deal with. I ended up getting deported on a first offense.
It's been 7 years now since my deportation, and it's been really hard. It's been hard on my family, it's been hard on my wife, and it's been hard on my kids. They're still paying for that mistake that I committed a long time ago, and I'm still paying for it to this day. My wife, she needs her husband. My kids, they need their father. Families belong together. Since my deportation, I started painting and I started doing my art thing. I called myself Deported Artist to give visibility to our situation, because ultimately it's not just me, but there's thousands and thousands of us in my situation. That's why I call myself Deported Artist, because I want to draw attention to our cause. There's a saying in Spanish that says, dejar de luchar es empezar a morir. And in English is, to stop to struggle is to begin to die. And as long as there's a breath in my body, I'm always going to fight for immigration reform. Families belong together, and I hope that when people see and hear my story and the other stories on this mural, they realize that we're all human, and as humans, we all make mistakes, but we all deserve the chance to come back home to our families. When you guys hear this, I encourage you guys to call your congressman, vote for in favor of immigration reform. Let's get all of us home. Pictures in this mural, we all have different stories, but one thing we all have in common is that we all want to come home. So let's make this happen. Thank you.
Can we pretend that airplanes in the night sky like shooting stars? I could really use a wish right now, wish right now.